Very much, Ziv. It's always a pleasure to come down annually to the Dealmakers Summit, our second year here, obviously in California, previously in New York and in LA. But by way of introduction, my name is Yosef Levine. I am a managing director in our innovation department at Deloitte in New York. I concentrate on harnessing all technology that's available to transform how we provide our services to our clients, particularly in the audit realm. I'm actually an auditor. So that's one part of my dream job. The other part is I help lead our digital business desk in New York, sort of a soft landing for companies when they come here. So I'm going to meet the previous presenter. We're going to hook up, hopefully have some coffee in New York. And I really love taking Israeli companies public and helping them grow and foster their relationship. Today with me, it's really a distinguished group of individuals that I'm sharing the stage with. Carla, who is the head of biz dev and strategic relationships at Visa, and Jeff, who's the former president of PayPal, CEO of OpenTable, and general partner Andreessen Horowitz. Thank you both very much for taking the time out of your schedules to come and share some insight to the crowd about the future. So Jeff, let's sit back and think a little bit about the changing in reality and where we are today from an ad tech perspective versus where we may have been even as young as 4 years ago. So now we're at the advent of ad tech 2.0. There's a lot of power, a lot of analytical power that we've heard about earlier today that's at the fingertips, of brands. And I call this ad tech 2.0. I think you refer to this in your research articles as direct response to 2.0. How do you think brands are going to harness and capitalize on all of this disruptive momentum?
I mean, we think something profound's happening as technology matures. I mean, in the history of advertising, there have been these huge intermediaries that sit between the brands and the consumer. And the brands have longed to have direct access to the consumer, but they've always had to go through either retail intermediaries like Walmart or Kmart or Sears or even Amazon, or media conglomerates, be it TV networks or Facebook and Google. Increasingly, we're seeing ways that brands are successfully accessing direct to consumers. And some of the prime ways, one, this whole trend towards pre-ordering. Lexus selling $14 billion of Model 3 cars in a week with no advertising. It was a complete viral and then word of mouth phenomenon. You're seeing things like Pinterest that enable brands to go direct to the consumer. J.Crew has about 250,000 followers on Pinterest and rewards those followers with advance notice of the new collections that will be coming out in the next couple of months. And so that community voraciously consumes the content, and J.Crew is not paying a penny for that. Or we're starting to see performance-based marketing platforms like Instacart, where brands used to, the famous John Wanamaker statement, I know half of my advertising is wasted, I don't know which half it is. Increasingly, performance advertising is eliminating the half that's wasted. So all of a sudden, brands have to develop whole new skill sets because going to direct consumer is a completely different thing.
Do you think brands are going to engage in direct retail via Amazon or another platform? Do you think that?
I mean, they've got to figure out how to go, because the power that a few retail platforms are getting is astonishing. I mean, there's reported that Amazon represents about half of all online spending in the United States. I didn't think it was that high. I knew it was high. I didn't think it was that high. But the leverage they then have, particularly in the categories they sell, the strong categories, the hard lines and electronics and media and things like that, is enormous. And so brands have to figure out how do you diversify and reduce that leverage.
So let me ask the final follow-up on this topic, and that's, I think a lot of people that are long on certain stocks. Is Walmart safe? Are they going to be disrupted?
I think Walmart is freaked out. And so they bought Jet.com for $3 billion. Mark Lohr is a compelling guy who had a really ambitious plan. I don't think it had gotten to the stage where it was $3 billion to buy the business. I think it was $3 billion to buy the talent. It's the biggest acqui-hire I've ever heard. And I think it reflects the concern. Walmart's been flat to down in comp store sales for a dozen quarters or something like that. They're looking at what's happened to Sears, what's happened to Kmart, and I think they're probably saying we're next if we don't get a serious serious online presence, we're a dinosaur.
Wow. So Carla, let's pivot to the concept of strategic partnerships, and I think a lot of the innovative technologies that's changing the retail and e-com landscape is really with these nimble startups. What's your criteria at Visa that you use for consideration in terms of working with and harnessing a lot of startups?
Yeah. So first of all, strategic partnerships are very important for us at Visa. We have a goal we want to grow and transform in the payment ecosystem. So we look at our partners as a way to create new distribution channels as well as expand markets. So let me highlight some of the type of companies that we work with and what we consider important. We are working with technology companies, the like of Google, Apple, Samsung, but we are also working with smaller type of companies. We work with payment facilitators. These are largely software-based companies that we enable with access to banking and payment services, which then they access to their merchants via APIs. And we're working with merchants, especially digital merchants, to create new digital payment experiences and facilitate global expansion. So what we care about, we want to work on deals that have big economic impact or broad impact. But just to be clear, we're not only working with large companies, we also work with small ones. For example, we did a strategic investment in Stripe in 2015. What we care about is also segments that are shifting payments from cash to online. So a great example of that is what we have seen happening in the transportation category, with the taxi category, right? With the likes of Uber and Lyft of the world. They've done a tremendous job moving cash out of markets. In fact, on Uber and Lyft, payments has disappeared. We care about companies that are innovating, not just from a technology perspective, but we like business models that scale in both developed as well as developing markets. This is very important because we want to drive change at a broad level, and there's still a lot of markets that are behind. For example, debit cards haven't been enabled for e-commerce in many markets, not just in developing markets, but also in some parts of Europe. So, you know, we like when there's mobile services and e-commerce companies that are challenging the status quo and want to go in places like Kenya and Nigeria and Egypt and the Netherlands, because then we have this opportunity to influence the financial services industry and payments to make these changes.
Well, so, Jeff, let's talk about deal making specifically. What I like to refer to as the art of the deal, whether it's an investment or a strategical partnership type of deal. You know, when do they work best? What's the secret sauce to success? And
separating investments from strategic alliances in the startup world are really hard to get right because there's so much fluidity on where the companies are going and whether they're friends or foes and things like that, that it's hard to make it work. When it does work, it can be magical. But I would say the majority actually don't, because goals change, you know, things move.
So startup-y we are, guys.
No, I mean, if a startup comes in and goes, you know, we've got the tiger by the tail, we got the key distribution deal or the key strategic deal with company X, that's like we're betting the company on one deal. That makes you really nervous. So they can be enablers, but we get nervous when they're creators. Yeah.
What about on the investment side? You know, what do you look for in terms of, you know, the best type of startup to invest in?
You know, it's this is a very humbling question to ask. It turns out the best performing funds in venture capital history, half the deals don't work. So, you know, you got to get ready. The things you're looking for are great entrepreneurs, you know, persistence, courage, you know, just because things will go wrong, an interesting product idea, and a uncapped opportunity if it works. The venture business, almost all the returns come from a handful of deals each year, literally less than 10, that generate 70, 80, 90% of returns. So one Facebook overcomes 999 everything else, and so you're trying to find the Facebook.
I don't want to take a negative approach with the follow-up question here, but I think there's a lot to learn from failure that will lead to, you know, positive successes in the next time around. So could you tell us about one of your investments that you really thought were going to make it and just didn't live up to expectation? And what was the anatomy of that?
Yeah, one of the higher profile ones was Fab.com. It went from vaunted unicorn status to basically out of business in the course of less than 24 months. And so what we're betting are people who are reaching for the brass ring and trying to make something incredible happen, and that leads to lots of risk taking, and sometimes we overreach together, and I think you do learn from your failures. Having investments that don't work, if you thoughtfully analyze why that would be, hopefully you internalize some of those things. I actually went to my partners with my first 5 years of learnings from what worked and what didn't. And so it was a very interesting discussion.
I'll be waiting for that book to come out.
Yeah, exactly.
Carla, let's turn to globalization. What are the opportunities for global companies or firms like Israel or across the world to really participate in the globalization trend?
Yeah. So I think we see tremendous benefits from globalization when we ourselves just recently became a truly global organization after we acquired Visa Europe. So multinational merchants love that because we can work with them in every single region around the world. And with that, we now have market leadership position in most markets. So I think we have a pretty good view of what's happening globally. Most economies are doing very well, with the exception of few. We see very strong trends in e-commerce. So last year, in 2016, was the first year that electronic payments, card payments, have surpassed cash. So again, this is the first year that electronic payments have surpassed cash. We're all talking about technology in this room, but we're still behind in many parts of the world. Total commerce opportunity is huge. It's a $22 trillion opportunity worldwide. And although e-commerce is massive, it's only 10% of that. So I think for companies in Israel that are so strong in technology and also in security, payments and e-commerce are only going to continue to grow and proliferate everywhere. So I think there's a great opportunity for companies in Israel to be the leader in this space. We're doing our part too as an organization to help our partners become more global. So for instance, we open up access to our network so that banks and developers can access our services via APIs. And I think that's probably reflective of also what's happening in the industry. We are co-developing with technology companies. We now have innovation centers throughout the world, here in San Francisco, Miami, London, Dubai, Singapore. We have offices in Tel Aviv. So please come work with us in Tel Aviv. We are giving fintech companies and payment facilitators licenses to go to all kinds of new markets and go to the underserved market. Because again, you can't become a global company if you can't accept. If you're a commerce business, you need to be able to accept electronic payments. And so I think from a global perspective, tech companies have fewer barriers to entry, and it's just a great environment overall right now.
That's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
So Jeff, I know that now the election is over, so we have some form of consistency, unless you check Twitter every day. But from an economic standpoint, the economy is somewhat changing. There's been a slight change in interest rates. Do you think under the current economic climate, there's additional opportunities that maybe didn't exist 6 to 12 months ago? The nature of venture is really long-term investing, and so we try to not focus on the current climates. A lot of the best internet companies have been started at the nadir of desolation in the valley,
markets. So it's one of the nice things. One of the few nice side effects of that is your competition doesn't get funded either. So OpenTable ran unopposed for close to a decade because it was started in the late 90s, and by the time the people corrected from the bubble came, it had such a lead. That said, the thing we're probably most worried about is it's magical being the Silicon Valley ecosystem, and probably the most prominent feature of it is the amount of diversity we see. We see entrepreneurs from Israel, from India, from China, from everywhere, of Iran, and it's the rule, not the exception, that you get that kind of global diversity on the founding teams. It would be we're terrified of a world where their barriers are put up to that happening. We're attracting some of the smartest entrepreneurs in the world. I think we should embrace them and help them out.
Totally hear that. It kind of goes back to the globalization discussion.
Yep.
That entrepreneurship has no boundaries.
Yep.
There's no
It's all about the human element and building that awesome team to go through the creative process.
Done right, it's an amazing meritocracy.
Totally. Carla, thinking about the global payment systems and all the cutting edge technology around the world and in certain key hubs for fintech, what's the most disruptive technology that you see in the payment space?
Yeah, so look, I think it's a great time in technology. I don't think anybody can argue, right? There's never been a better time in technology. We're excited about a few things. But before we get to the disruption part, I think there's still a bit, basic stuff to do. So here's what I think.
We're not going to Bitcoin tomorrow.
Okay, we're not going to Bitcoin or.
It's going to be Ethereum, not Bitcoin. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I think first, internet and mobile technologies are still going to be the biggest drivers, right? I mean, if you take the word map and you can visualize Visa or maybe even the payment systems, you can see that we light up in some parts of the world, but not everywhere. So I think it's really internet and mobile technologies that are going to allow us to connect the rest of the world. So we have this opportunity over the next 10 years to bring 2 billion people who haven't been part of the commerce space yet, who haven't been participating in commerce, to come onto the payment networks and to participate in commerce. A great example of that is India, right? When the Indian government last year took 2 of the largest denominations out of circulation, it was chaotic at the beginning, but it has spurred massive innovation. At the time, there was only 1.5 million merchants in India that accepted electronic payments. Contrast that to 400 million around the world. But in the last few months, we've been able to sign up 600,000 new merchants. So it took years for 1.5 and just like 4 months to get over 500,000. I'm excited about the notion of digitizing payments in the physical space. I'm not a good example because I don't go to retail stores at all anymore, but there's still a lot of people that enjoy that experience. So I think but waiting in line in grocery stores is just getting crazy and nobody enjoyed that. So we see a future where you can pay for things as you put them in your shopping cart. We're also very excited about Internet of Things. We think when IoT will come together, there will be about 20 billion devices connected by 2020. And so we want to make sure in the payment space that we have payments enabled in all of those devices and that we have mechanism for being able to use payments. So, we can see a future where your fridge has sensor technologies in it and it's connected with Instacart and is ordering food and paying for itself.
Then somebody delivers it and that's
and
it.
somebody delivers it. So I think it's...
As long as they don't leave the milk outside and
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
somebody got to innovate that,
well,
guys.
they will
Come on.
have fridge, right? They will, I guess there's some companies that are working on maybe the robot will come deliver and will be able to open the door with some wearable technology and then deliver the food for you in the fridge. It's kind of a bit scary though too. But you have all those things are coming together. And by the way, this connected world, we've been talking about it for a while, right? I mean, I've been in Silicon Valley since 2003. We've been talking about this word that's going to be all connected. What has been missing though is, how is payment going to make this possible from a technology as well as a commercial perspective, right? And now it's possible. So we are, also partnering with a lot of tech companies, of course, like, we're going to rely on IBM to be able to implement these solutions directly with OEMs. Certainly the cloud-based companies, the Adyen's, the Stripe, the Braintrees of the world are much, they have the ability to sign up merchants much faster than traditional acquirers, right? So that's, the Airbnbs of the world are all working with a new type of payment facilitators. So I think the ecosystem is very complex though, and I think there are going to be a lot of partners playing a very important role, towards the future of payment.
So Jeff, let's talk about the elephant of the room or the elephant of the conference. It seems as though whenever there's a Dealmakers summit, there's some sort of big deal that's always...
We should have more. We should have more summits.
So we should have more summits. Yeah. So Ziv, take that as a to-do. Yeah. The Mobileye purchase, right? Massive deal, for Intel, but I don't think we necessarily have to look at it just through an Israel lens, but from a general tech lens of a deal that size. Do you think there's going to be a lot more consolidation of public companies acquiring other public companies in a similar vein?
I think the M&A environment is going to dial up pretty significantly. It's becoming clearer and clearer that a lot of the once very valuable legacy tech companies are facing serious threats from new technologies. It's particularly acute in the auto space. You have Mobileye and that purchase. I mean, you also had Uber buying Otto, which was, I think, a 7-month-old self-driving car company for $600 or $700 million, and just billion-dollar deals of startups happening here and there. So I think there is a broad agreement. My partner Mark Andreessen said software is eating the world. I think people are really finally coming to terms that it is coming. It's not going to go away, and you have to respond. And it's something as big as the global car business. If autonomous vehicles are coming, and there are 4 or 5 different companies that are driving them on the 280 and the 101 right now. I mean, I just saw Apple's truck yesterday. You see Google's cars 5 times a day. You see Uber's cars. I mean, all these cars are just flying around, and the autonomous vehicle is essentially here. And so the car company, the global auto industry is trying to figure out, what does this mean for us?
So let's put on a lens of the Mobileye idea of that of the shareholder of Mobileye. Do you think that by Intel purchasing them, that unlocks shareholder value?
That's always the magic question. Did they sell cheap? I mean, I remember when Facebook bought Instagram, people were laughing. Oh, what a ridiculous purchase. They paid $1 billion for a little photo app. That little photo app supposedly estimated by analysts to be worth $30 or $40 billion now. So, it's so hard to tell. If Intel owns autonomous vehicle chips and sensors for the future, it was a steal. If it develops differently, it wasn't. I actually like the risk-taking aspect of what they're trying to accomplish.
Wow. So for those of you who don't read the New York Times, 48 hours ago, Jeff was listed as the 3rd best VC globally in the world. So how does it feel to be number 3? And what about everybody else in the audience that didn't even make the list?
I'm a very competitive guy, so number 3 is not quite there. I will note that one of the people in front of me, one of the deals that created a lot of his reputation was OpenTable. But it's ultimately, I mean, it's.
So you can take credit for that. You get to move up to at least 2.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's flattering, but it's wildly premature, and so you kind of just ignore it because all the gains that all these great companies are talking about are still private companies. All the gains are marks and paper gains, and that's not real gains. So, if some of those come to fruition like we hope we could, then we'll celebrate. But it's right now we've got work to do.
So Carla,
I'm intimidated now.
It's like the Wayne's World. We're not worthy. We're not worthy. So Carla, let's sort of end off on doing what I call the crystal ball routine. Take a minute. What's payment going to look like over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I guess I can see many things, but maybe one, because I dream of that situation, is something around contextual commerce. And with contextual commerce, for example, I'll be able to, there will be, maybe some things helping me on a trip, for example. So I go on a trip. When I leave the airport, I don't need to use my phone to order an Uber. An Uber is waiting for me. When I go to the hotel room, I'm tired. I don't need to go to the front desk to check in. I walk to the room. The doors open up with my wearable or something, and then my ribeye steak dinner is delivered, and I didn't order it. So I think,
hang out with you, I'm liking that.
So I think we're getting close to getting there in 2 years, right? And we're talking about, how exciting, but also how scary that is, right? Elon Musk is talking about artificial intelligence becoming, dangerous at some point. I don't think it's going to be dangerous in 2 years, but I think it's going to enable, these more of contextual commerce experiences.
Agreed.
So Jeff, what about your crystal ball? What's it looking like from the seat of a VC? Or from number 3, however.
I mean, it's actually we get to see the future, essentially. We get the best entrepreneurs coming in with wild, crazy ideas, and it actually makes you an optimist. There are lots of challenges that our country, the world's facing. Long-term employment is one of them. I think the threat from automation is a real threat. But you see the new company creation process and what happens. We invested in Pinterest, it was 8 people. It's now 1,000. When we invested in Airbnb, it was 30. It's now 3,000. But more importantly, there's 1 million people earning, being empowered economically on the platform. So, I mean, the world will change, but what the alchemy that happens in technology of new companies springing up and creating opportunity, employment, value it makes you an optimist.
Awesome. Thank you guys both very much for taking time out of your busy days to come down.
Thank you, Yosef.